bridals. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
And looking at where you've come from, you've been able to build a brand in the textile industry. How did you manage to do that?
Basically, it's a lot of hard work, a lot of long hours. Luckily for me, I also have the training, so I have the technical skills which have enabled me to be able to build my brand and to be able to create clothes from scratch because I actually know what it is that I am doing. But yeah, it's a lot of hard work, a lot of determination, and just constantly putting out stuff regardless of what happens. And eventually we get better and we get to a point where people appreciate what we're doing.
And looking at the feature there, do you identify with some of the challenges and some of the issues that were being spoken about? One in particular being scaling up globally and being able to compete in the global market. Are there similar challenges for you?
Yeah, absolutely. Because and there's something that was mentioned about the cost of doing production locally. We're not producing a lot of fabric. So, for example, for me, everything that I virtually all the clothes we make are from materials which are brought in from Asia. So by the time it's I think it's a little bit difficult to compete because then our prices become so high. If I was then going to scale up, how do I compete? How do I compete with China if a dress is being sold for 40,000? 40,000 is barely my cost price. Then aside from that, also the technology. Do we have the capacity here to be able to produce and put stuff in stores? So if for example, an American large store came to me and told me we need 100 dresses. Can I do it? No. So I don't have the capacity, I don't have the materials, and then even in terms of skills, do I have enough people to be able to do that? So it's still a little bit of a challenge for us here.
And in terms of the high cost production, where is it highest at?
Sorry.
In terms of the cost production, what would you say is taking the bulk of it that is bringing the cost production so high?
It's everything because it's a combination of all those factors. The materials are imported. They're very expensive. The cost of labor in Kenya, if you compare to the cost of labor in Asia, is really high. Of course, we want people to live comfortably. We can't now start paying people below the minimum wage because we want to, produce. So there's things like that. And then even the cost of machinery, if I wanted to get machinery, is very high for me. And for a small company, if we don't have maybe like consortiums in places where I can go and do large-scale production, then it becomes very costly to produce small runs. And even the textile manufacturers are not, we don't work as closely with them as we should because what we're producing is very small quantity. So it doesn't make sense for them to produce fabrics for us, and it doesn't make sense for us to buy fabrics for them. So if they say they want me to buy 10,000 meters or 1,000 meters of one style of fabric, it for me will not make any sense. So it ends up like the cost of production at every single point. I think everything is contributing to the high cost of production in Kenya.
And also now, in terms of this perception that we as consumers have, do you find that we will turn more to foreign goods and foreign, fashion wear than our local industry? Do we support our local industry?
Well, I think there has been a lot of that in the past, and I get a lot of, initially I used to get a lot of people telling me, oh, fundis always take clothes and they spoil my fabrics and blah, blah, blah. So excuse me, we have the perception, yes, that goods brought from outside are of a much higher quality. But I think right now there's a growing pride in made in Kenya. And maybe what impedes us from supporting the local industry as much as we would like to is the cost of the stuff that is made locally. So I'd love for all Kenyans to come and buy wedding dresses from me, but I cannot meet some of the price points. Like for me to be profitable, I cannot make a dress at a certain price point. So I can say that I've been doing this for about 4 years now, and the perception is changing, and people are so proud to be wearing Kenyan, but it's not yet accessible to everyone. Yeah.
And how about in terms of the fabrics? As you said, most of your fabrics here have been imported. Why not use local fabrics? Is it that we don't have good quality fabrics here? Are we not producing them? What is the
It's a combination of those factors. And just on the feature that you had before, we were talking about how most of our textile mills have been closed. In the 80s, it was like the cotton industry in Kenya was booming. Then it sort of plummeted, and that hasn't really recovered. So there's a very small variety of fabrics being produced. So if you want to make your uniforms, yes, there's cotton available, and it's fairly good cotton. But if you want to expand outside of that, it's not being produced locally. So we are limited to bringing stuff from outside. So there's need for us to invest in our textile industry so that we can expand what it is that we're producing, or maybe specialize in particular things and make us more competitive.
How about the initiative of the government? The government launched their initiative on Buy Kenya and say that they are doing as much as they can to support the textile industry. Do you think that they have been supportive, and has it sort of made it easier for your business?
I think it hasn't trickled down to us yet. The government is trying, but I think there's still a lot that needs to be done in terms of policies, in terms of investment, in terms of education, training. There's still a lot more that we can do if we really want to grow our industry. And if we just look at examples of countries like Mauritius, there was like a really concerted effort to grow their textile industry. And that like one of the I think that one of the leading countries in production in Africa. So the government is trying, but I think there's so much more that can be done for us to get to a point where we are competing with other countries.
And lately, the conversation has been carried around whether to do away with second-hand clothing, which we know is, the bulk of where Kenyans spend their money in terms of the textile industry. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think that's a good move?
I think it is. It's a catch-22 because we would love to get rid of Mtumba, but then what happens to the people at the lowest end of the spectrum who can't really afford to buy clothes for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1,000 shillings? What happens to that? So it's a good initiative, but it will take time for it to actually take root because the industry needs to be able to produce at that lowest level for us to move away from Mutumba. Because right now, I think it serves almost all of us really, really well. The guys who can afford to buy the locally made, high-end stuff is a very small fraction compared to everyone else who still needs to wear clothes anyway, but who cannot afford to buy something fancy every other day. Yeah.
And as we wind up, what are your plans in terms of your brand, and what are you planning to do to take it to the next level?
Okay, so at the moment, I am trying to scale up. I'm trying to expand. I would like to say that I'd like to do more locally. Definitely all my production is going to remain in Kenya. I'd like to do more with maybe using local techniques to create very unique clothing and very sort of a bridal line with an identity that's strongly Kenyan. That doesn't necessarily mean African fabric, but just something that is very strongly rooted in Kenya. But for the time being, I'd say in terms of expansion, I'd also like to be able to go and source my own fabrics because that way I can also bring down the costs for my consumers. But definitely we're staying Kenyan as much as we possibly can, and I just like to encourage everyone to keep on buying Kenyan.
Thank you so much, and thank you for coming in and shedding some light on the textile industry, and I'd like to wish you all the best.
Thank you so much.
In your journey. And that was Ogake, and the topic of discussion was on the textile industry. And now we move it over to fact